Hello everyone, it's Larry. This is a video of how I made this Lego model of Percy from Thomas & Friends. Now, much like my Thomas model, the history of me making it goes back quite a bit. Around 4 years ago, when I designed my draft Thomas model, I remember also designing a Toby and a Percy. I unfortunately lost the actual original file, but this is a recreation of what I think it would have looked like. Some things stayed the same, like the general shape of the cab, and some things I just generally got better at designing over time and practice, like the lack of detail on the wheels, the very naff-looking buffer beam, and using these indented headlight pieces for the cab windows. But there was one thing that took more than just practice to solve. One glaring, round, important part of Percy's design that can be quite a difficult challenge to represent in Lego. So much so that it's probably the reason I put off building Percy for so long. The boiler. Now, okay, this was fine, and I'm sure some of you wouldn't complain if I built Percy like this, but let's be real, he just does not look like that, does he? Lego unfortunately does not make it easy to build cylinders at every possible scale. Like sure, there are Lego brick cylinders that are 2 studs wide and 4 studs wide, but if you want something in between, you've got to get creative. Advanced full-scale Lego train builders come up with all sorts of solutions to get cylinders looking perfectly sized and perfectly rounded. So I knew this would be no easy task, and just over a year ago, I attempted it. But first I'd like to explain straight away that I knew I'd need lots of space between these blocks, otherwise all I can fit between them is this. And something I always remembered is that Percy was portrayed a lot wider than Thomas, so it would feel odd to me if they were the same width. So for both of these reasons, and despite the fact that every small train I've made up until now was 4 studs wide, I figured it made sense to make Percy 5 studs wide. But with wheels that still run on the 4 wide track, of course. With all this in mind, I made my first proper attempt. There were no wheels here yet, but there were already things I was much happier with, compared to this. Like the buffer beam, the funnel, the cab door, which used the same technique as Thomas's, as did most of the rear, and the general shape of it at a 5 wide scale. That's unfortunately where the positives ended though, because this boiler sucked. It infuriated me that the top of it was slightly sunken in like a river, and the same for this bit under the smoke box. But most annoying was this colour mismatch, which I now need to explain. Because, you see, this is not green. Okay, that feels weird to say without context, but basic Lego green is surprisingly dark compared to Lego bright green, which has seen increasing use over the years. The two can be hard to tell apart on camera, and I have already built Duck and Boko with regular Lego green, but regardless, since I went out of my way to build Thomas with dark azure instead of regular blue, I wanted to build Percy out of bright green pieces. I knew this would be a challenge, because there are 3 times fewer pieces in bright green compared to green, but I thought it would be worth it. Right now, these pieces are rare in bright green, but luckily I was able to make them out of smaller pieces that aren't. Unfortunately though, not a single one of these pieces exists in the colour, which was really annoying. As you could see, I briefly debated substituting them for regular green pieces, but I hate it, it sucks. So I made this version, which looks better, but isn't great. The annoying river on top was gone, and it was built with 4 of these pieces attached on like this, which I liked. But these slopes at the bottom didn't quite line up with them, which was frustrating, and also it wasn't buildable, because this brick fuses into this slope. But even if everything was fine, I wasn't really happy with the look of it. The smoke box was so high up, and the whole boiler felt too narrow, when ideally it would be wide. But hey, Percy has wheels now. I used antenna pieces for the side rods, connected to the cylinders, which were cylinders. Also, connecting an even-studded wheelbase to an odd-studded body was easier said than done. My initial draft was most of it being flat and some of it using jumper plates. Unfortunately, none of this solved the boiler, and with it all crammed into that tiny space and working with bright green, it felt like such mental arithmetics to come up with any kind of technique that would be possible to build, let alone look good. But eventually, I came up with this. Essentially, it's one section built on top, along with 2 sections on the sides, with a core center that holds it all together. Also, I only realized after I built it that I could have made this way simpler, but you live and you learn. I tried raising it by half a plate to make this possible, and I was generally happy with it, but it just felt too high up. So I lowered it again, and instead opted for a bit of a cheap technique to make this block possible. Also, it may look weird that these blocks are flush with this piece here, but it had to be this way for structural purposes. Hold on, you may have noticed this mysterious brick appear here. This was because when I looked up reference images of Percy, I found out there was actually a support beam under the smoke box. I thought, huh, that's weird. I don't remember that being there. But I thought maybe it's a Mandela effect or something. I tried building it, but it was just annoying, as it didn't line up vertically or horizontally, leaving an unsightly gap no matter what. I tried other crazy techniques to try achieving it to be as accurate as possible, but wasn't happy with any of them. So after talking about this to my friend Luke, or Lead Paint Crisis, I found out that actually Percy didn't have a support beam, at least to begin with. Then for some reason they just added it on at some point during the show, which persisted throughout the CGI era. It was quite relieving to know I was right to not remember it being there, and even more relieving to know I could just choose not to build it, and it would still be accurate. Luke also informed me that actually, Percy is not symmetrical. I never knew this, but this side has a taller block than this side, so I incorporated this into the build. Also, Luke encouraged me to shrink the buffer beam distance, and to make the cylinder in line with the running board, which, knowing how finicky this stuff is, made me go, we'll see about that. But surprisingly, I managed to find a straightforward solution to that. I also redesigned the wheelbase so that these 2x2 plates fit perfectly into the underside of these 3x3 plates, making it so much more simple and secure than before. There were some things that weren't quite ideal though. Ideally the face and smoke box would be slightly bigger, but these are Lego pieces we're working with. The next size up would be way too big. I debated changing the coal bunker to be more accurate, first trying it like ducks, which was just wrong, then like this. But honestly, it looked a bit too much to me, so I left it as is. Grated pieces only exist 2 studs wide, so I annoyingly had to have this middle one be a flat tile. The cab windows were also annoying, because ideally I'd make them like Thomas's, but these are the only 1x1 bricks with a hole that exist in bright green, and physics just don't allow them to be on the back. So unfortunately I just had to make it flat. And yes, I can use these pieces to represent the cab windows, but I just don't like them, I'm sorry. All these impossible annoyances aside, I was actually very happy with this build. So I finished it up, and I created some building instructions. For the face, I illustrated Percy's face to print onto sticky back paper and use as a sticker. Then I ordered the pieces. It was done. Here he is without any stickers. Then it was stickering time. I used adhesive vinyl for most of it, and I needed all 3 colours that I own. But first was his face, which I printed on sticky back paper. I like to think I've gotten better at cutting these small circles, but it's still not easy. I made sure it fit the face piece, and I peeled off the sticker. Then I applied it to the smoke box. Already my model was looking so much more like Percy, but we are far from done here. I also cut out another face of him looking the other way, should I need it. Then it was time to get out the cutting mat. I was most unsure about the cab windows, so I started on them straight away, and it was tough working with these pieces. I used long thin strips around the extrusion, but it didn't feel like enough, so I tried to cut small circles to go around it, which was incredibly annoying to do at this scale. All zoomed in like that, this might not all look so small, but this is how tiny it all is that I was working with. and in the end they were just too small. So I thought about solutions, and I looked for external help. I found a hole puncher, and I cut perfect circles out of the vinyl, and they were slightly too big, but I was able to cut and adjust them, then cut a ring around them. And hey presto, Percy has cab windows. They might not be the best, but they're not the worst either. For the rear cab windows, as there were no suitable bricks with a hole, I had to make fake ones, with hole-punched black vinyl with a yellow ring. I'm happy with how these look, and part of me wants to replace the front ones to look like this too, but I didn't want to cop out of them being actual holes on the design, at least for now. Next it was time for the side window, which was easier than Thomas's, as Percy's has no outline, it's just a gap, which I stuck on with black vinyl. After measuring everything, it turns out I got the width of the door wrong, which was really irritating, so I cut a bit extra and fixed it. Then I cut the other side. After cutting some black strips on the front, it was then time to make the sides of the running board look nice. First I cut black bits to cover the extra white bits, then I stretched a long red strip perfectly across the sides. I'm so happy with this, and I feel like it transforms the model. I cleared the cutting mat, and I then wanted to get the hardest part straight out of the way. Cutting numbers at this scale has proven difficult and time-consuming, but in my opinion it's worth it because the vinyl looks great and the colours and textures are much more vibrant than printed paper. I make an exception where the numbers are just too small or finicky though, or if there are just too many of them, but this is just about manageable. So I cut a number 6 small enough to fit in my fingertip, and I once again forgot that I have to draw them backwards on the flip side of the paper, else they will turn out backwards. When will I learn? So I cut them out again, and they seemed okay. The hole inside it would be too small to cut out, so I'd cut a small red circle and stick it on top instead. Because of this, I found it funny how they kinda look like speech marks here, like they're about to say something. Oh wow, what's that? After cutting out the red outline and finishing them, they looked a bit off to me, so I made some adjustments. Then, I was quite happy with them. From there on out, it was plain sailing, as it was just pinstriping, which on Percy is simple. And then, it was done. Here he is with Thomas. And Toby. And here he is with the rest of the Steam team so far. Here's him with the other green engines. And everyone else. And here he is on the tracks. And now it's time for something a little special. Enjoy. Percy pulled up next to Toby. "Hello, Percy, how are things?" asked Toby. "Boring," replied Percy. "Nothing exciting ever happens. It's just coal, coal, coal and trucks, trucks, trucks." "Well, why not have a few fast spins on the turntable? You'll like that," said Toby. "I think I'll just feel giddy." "Oh, cheer up, Percy. You'll soon know more about trucks than any other engine. That'll be exciting," called Toby. The trucks were still grumbling. You're much too small to pull all of us. We want another engine, or we'll be struggling up the hill all night. Percy decided just to carry on. Go to it, Percy! Shouted the driver as they started climbing the hill. The trucks were still joking. Too slow! More power! Be quiet, said Percy angrily. Then there was trouble. A coupling broke. Oh no, said Percy. Surprise, surprise, catch us if you can! Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe for more and maybe check out my other stuff. The instructions are on Rebrickable, but wait, I have something new to announce. As the channel grows, I want to do more, and I'm kindly asking for your support. On the horizon, as well as more builds and other videos, I am planning to actually make a 4-wide LEGO train layout, like a lot of you have been asking. Even if it's small, it won't be cheap, and I'm at the point now where I think a Patreon is in order. In exchange for your support, you can have every set of instructions I've ever made up until now, and the actual Bricklink Studio files, which I've never even put up for download before. Also, I know a lot of you love asking me what I'm building next, and before I could never really answer that. But now, if you become a Larry's LEGO patron, you can not only know what's coming next before everyone else does, you can help decide what comes next through voting. And anyone who pledges gets their name at the end of the video. Please consider pledging today to support more videos and more builds. But don't worry if you can't give money. The best thing you can do to support me is just to stay subscribed and keep enjoying my videos. And the mail train is on the way. Thank you all for all of your support, and thanks for watching. Ta-ta for now.